Lovely first-year teachers who are taking the time out of their busy schedules to, not offense to you guys aren't very busy. We're going to go ahead and get started on time so we can get out of here at a reasonable hour as well. First off, thank you guys very much for coming this evening. It means a lot to us at Mesa, and it means a lot to them to not have to talk to an empty crowd or just to me. So thank you all for coming. Hopefully the pizza was enough to get you here and some great answers from these people as well. And before we get started, big thank you to the five of you for being here tonight. We really appreciate you guys coming back and telling us about how UJ shaped your experiences this year and how this year is kind of influencing how you're looking at teaching and learning and all those kind of things. So thank you all very much for being here. One more shout out to Miranda, Kayla, and Cassie who really did all the work. I'm just kind of here to look like I'm cool and be the figurehead. So yeah, I like to talk. I get to listen.
Didn't know that.
You guys think he looks cool?
Cooler than you, man.
0% chance.
Yeah. So the way the night's going to work is we have, based on the responses we got from you all, we're going to have 4 sections to tonight's evening that are going to be kind of different groupings of questions. We're going to start off with a nice basic introduction, let them tell you about themselves. Then we're going to do a section on preparing for year 1, so what can you be doing to be ready for the job market, those kind of things. A big theme on the responses was about classroom management, so we'll move into a section about the questions you had on how do we handle classroom management. And then the third section will be the realizations of year 1, so kind of those questions about now that you're there, what's it like, those kind of ideas. And then we'll finish the last 10 or 15 minutes with an open forum. So if you're listening to their responses and that gives you any questions that you want to ask either one of the teachers specifically or to the panel, feel free to jot that down, and then at the end we'll open it up to whatever questions you have. And we'll try to be out of here about 7:30. It might run a few minutes late, it might run a few minutes early, depending on how things go. So let's get rocking and rolling. So the first thing I guess we're going to ask is if you guys don't mind just kind of going down the list and giving us a little bit of introduction, your name, what school you're teaching at, what classes you're teaching, and any extracurricular activities that you've kind of taken on since you started year 1. And we can just go alphabetically. So Mr. Kane, you're up.
Okay, so my name is Blair Kane. I teach at Gainesville High School. I'm teaching 3 Algebra 1 classes with support, so they're all 3-year long. And then I'm also coaching golf currently in the spring.
My name is Jodzia Hutchings. I teach at Cedar Shoals High School on the east side of Athens. I'm teaching 5 collaborative analytic geometry classes, so I have a co-teacher in my room. And I don't do sports or any clubs, but an extracurricular activity that I picked up was a learning community. So every month or bi-monthly we'll have a teacher learning community, which takes up pretty much just as much time as coaching. So
My name is Justin Lawrence. I teach 8th grade math at Malcolm Bridge Middle School in Oconee County. It feeds into North Oconee. I have 3 grade level math classes, just the 8th grade math. 2 of them are support classes with a co-teacher. And then I have 1 accelerated Algebra 1 Geometry A class, which is actually a high school level class that I'm teaching to 8th graders who will take calculus or AP calculus as juniors. I coached the 8th grade football team in the winter or the fall. That went well, undefeated, that was awesome. Then I coached the 9th grade basketball team at the high school in the winter, and currently I'm not coaching in the spring, thank goodness.
My name is Jeremiah Namkung. I teach at Tucker Middle School, 6th grade math. I'm also an ESOL teacher because I'm ESOL certified. I teach 3 ESOL classes and 1 gifted class, and one of those ESOL classes is Push In with a co-teacher. Extracurricular activities, I've coached soccer year long. Currently in the season, undefeated with the girls, 3-1 for the boys, so it's a great start. I'm also part of our PBIS leadership committee as a data analyst.
What is PBI?
PBIS is Positive Behavior Intervention and Support.
You got into PBI's first year?
First year, yeah.
Look at you. That's impressive.
Hi, I'm Rachel Seaschultz, and I teach at Decatur High School. So Decatur is right outside of the city of Atlanta. I'm about 10 miles from downtown. So as soon as you hit inside the perimeter, that first little city that you hit is Decatur. I teach IB, Accelerated Pre-Calculus, which covers topics that are in everything that you've learned from Dr. Moore in his book, all the way up to calculus, so I've touched everything in those sort of areas. And then I teach 3 sections of that, and those are accelerated juniors who will either be taking AP Calculus, BC, or AV next year, or AP Stats next year. And then I also have 2 sections of co-taught on-level Algebra 1. Extracurriculars, I am part of our softball coaching team. This year I was an assistant JV coach. Next year I will be taking on as the full-time head coach.
It's a little bit of a jump.
Yeah, that's what I said. And then I'm also our math team club sponsor, and I'm part of our equity team at Decatur High School.
So these are our 5 teachers. We're going to jump into our first section, which is prepping for year 1. Just so you all know, don't feel obligated. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what to say, not to say but feel obligated. You don't have to answer every question if you don't feel like it or if you don't have anything to add. So we're just going to throw it out to the panel, and then if you feel like you have a response, feel free to chime in. So the first question that our attendees wanted to know about is, what experience or experiences have you had that best prepared you for your first year of teaching?
I'm gonna start.
It was like, Betsy, it's either you or it's going to be me, so.
Y'all, a running joke of our whole cohort was that I talk way too much, and I'm the first person to talk all the time.
You wonder why.
I have so much to share. So I taught a lot before actually getting into my first year of teaching. So like, I lie to my students a lot. So what prepared seriously, what prepared me for being a teacher was just acting like I was a teacher way too early. So like the summers before, even when we were still in our cohort and like learning in college, I would go teach summer classes with like little middle school kids, or like I would just teach whenever I got the opportunity. And in my student teaching, 3 weeks into student teaching, my teacher just gave me all the classes. So like if you teach and teach and teach and teach before you actually become a teacher, I think that was what prepared me the most.
I think to piggyback off of what she said, obviously getting experience in front of the classroom, you know, you go to your student teaching or your practicums and where you have in classroom experiences, and one of the hardest things to do is make that decision to say, I'm going to step up and do it now, as opposed to put it off until later, is one of the most difficult decisions. Like, we have student teachers at my school right now, and I'm having to push, like, I don't have a student teacher, but my co-teacher does, and I'm having to be like, hey, you want to do the warm-up today? Hey, you want to do the warm-up? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, if you're going to be good at this, you want to walk in the door and go, hey, let me go. Just make mistakes. My first day when I was student teaching at North, literally the first day of planning, I talked to my mentor teacher, and the next day I was standing in front of the classroom, the first day they came back from winter break. We sat down and watched somebody on Claire Sarver. We sat down, I got to work with her too, and watched her, and she's incredible. But myself and the other teacher that I co-taught with as student teachers, we stood right up and just started making mistakes, and she's correcting us, and it was like, oh man, I feel awful because I made this terrible mistake and I just told them something totally wrong. But until you get up there and make that mistake, you're not going to realize that it's okay to make the mistake and try to fix it next time. So I think that that's important. Literally just making that decision to stand up when you're in this classroom.
To piggyback off of what they said, again, we're educators, but we're math educators. So I think the best experience that I've gotten, and especially when talking to my colleagues who I'm definitively the youngest person teaching at my school, they know that I know what I'm talking about. I think we have one of the best mathematically preparing programs, and I get challenged day by day in all levels of my classes of experiences that I've had both here in Adderhold to think about math differently, whether it's how Dr. Moore comes in and teaches you pre-calculus in a way you never thought about pre-calculus. Everybody takes that class and it transforms the way you think about it. Or thinking about, okay, let me go into linear algebra mode, and talking about that with some of my students and being able to explain that really well, and knowing that I have the math authority to go in front of a classroom and say, I know what I'm talking about, and I know for my students, especially because I teach people who are in the same generation as me and who are 5 years younger than me and who even look older than me. It is really hard for them to trust that, but as soon as I came into the room with the authority of, here, I have all of this experience pedagogically to teach you mathematics, as well as here, I've taken all these courses. I know what this means in a math sense as well. I think that was something that, again, I think everybody can agree to, that we get a much better experience in comparison to other places, especially locally.
So Rachel segued really nicely into our next question, if anyone does anyone have like something that they'd like to add to those responses? Okay, well, I would like to actually clarify something Jadzia said. So Jadzia, you had said that you had a bunch of, you would go back in the summers. And for our younger attendees, could you talk about like, what exactly is this experience you're talking about where you get to go into teaching?
Yeah, so I taught at, there's a UGA Summer Academy that runs out of the Georgia Center. They're looking for student teachers if you want to teach a week over the summer. There are a multitude of classes, so like all the way from sign language to writing comic books to pre-med school. So like if you wanted to be an assistant teacher, I did that. I went to California and taught with this program called Center for Talented Youth, so CTY. If you ever wanted to get a really in-depth teaching experience, that was really good. We like wrote reviews on students and made lesson plans and did all these things. So, and then I have a company that I work with called Math Mind Workshop. It's actually really interesting if you look into it and you want to teach younger kids. Math Mind, like, builds curriculums for summer programs for kids. So I worked at Rush and taught kids, and then they would go jump, and then we would talk about physics, and then they would go jump. So I've taught at like 3 different summer camps, either a week or 3 weeks long.
Does anyone else have any of those kind of experiences?
You did that kind
Uh,
of summer camp thing too.
No, I was a site coordinator for a nonprofit tutoring organization for a good 2 years, and that was like during the program. So actually, before I actually got into the math ed program, so a lot of that experience does help. As long as if you're working part time, if you're working at with some kind of job, just working with students in general, that's gonna help out a lot. And like even here, like I don't know if any of y'all work at Rankin. I tutored a lot of I tutor a lot of student athletes here. I mean, that gets you into the mindset of using what you learned here and applying it to, one-on-one tutoring. And that actually helps out in the classroom, from what I think.
I think especially if you're looking to teach, again, I don't know if anybody in here is doing the new certification where it's higher ed math. Is that I can't remember what the new certification is called, Dean. But again, if for whatever reason higher education interests you in terms of teaching collegiately, teaching calculus or AP stats or higher level math, teaching at Rankin with someone who, again, is close to your age, and especially if you're wanting to do that sooner rather than later, getting in the mind of how somebody that old thinks versus someone who is younger, because I even see it just in a 2-year difference between the students I teach, and I can definitely say I tutored pre-calculus over the summer, and it helped me more than I ever thought it would this year. So just a idea for you guys if that's something you're looking into, and I know they're definitely always looking for math tutors. Always, always, always.
Awesome. So Rachel had actually, when I had said that we were going to move on, was talking about how Dr. Moore's class and the program here prepares you very well mathematically. One of the questions that the attendees were wondering about was, could you talk about what aspects of the UGA program you think best prepared you? Like what things you think really are applicable to what you're doing now? And is there anything that you wish UGA had done for you that you kind of feel was lacking in their program?
Well, I'd say one thing, especially with Dr. Moore and Dr. Smith, who's no longer here, but just being able to think abstractly, think in different ways, think like your students, because some of your students are going to make mistakes. We make mistakes. I mean, I'm sure all of y'all make mistakes in your classroom. It's not a perfect world. You're going to make them. But some of your students, they're going to want to, sometimes I don't want to say this, but they want to see you make a mistake. And if you do, just go along with it, play along with it. And that's one thing that we learned in Dr. Moore's class. He gave us some challenging problems where it took us 30 minutes to figure out one problem. And sometimes you gotta give those to your students and make them work together to challenge their brain, because they're used to just wanting to do this and get everything just fast, and be able to see those problems, see us struggle, and then let them do it. It really helped me, because I love giving my students challenging problems and let them watch them struggle, and it just challenges their brain more than they're used to.
Man, no love for Dr. Izzy.
I know, I just.
Hey, he's got his time. He's got his time.
I was gonna say this, similar to Moore and Ejok, one of the things that really happened in our cohort with Ejok is we had like multiple day arguments about the meaning of multiplication.
Happens in every
And
cohort.
while it felt like we were dragging this subject out into way too much, I feel like a lot of the discussions and arguments between a couple of our different students really focused on what Blair said, like, these kids are gonna think differently about things. So even though, I didn't think about the things the way Jadzia might think about it, hearing the way she said it or thinks is gonna help me try to help a student who doesn't understand how I'm saying it and may be thinking about it totally different.
It definitely keeps you open-minded to how students think. Like,
And it's hard to be open-minded when they're going, no.
oh yeah.
I feel like you can't. It's tough.
And I think some of the secondary classes that, again, like not are required, do that too. I know about every single week, I think about the history of math. So many of my students, like, they are not math-minded, they are not STEM-minded, but I have to make a connection somehow, some way to them, and it's like, okay, let me talk about this, let me talk about why this is relevant to you and why it shaped who you are today. Talking about the history of math. Some of my students, again, they're abstract thinkers, and the number of times I've actually gotten to introduce real mathematical proof, not the two-column crap that we had to do in high school, y'all know what I'm talking about, proof. I've actually gotten to utilize that and see the foundations building for my students, and it's like, wow, I can think about math in a different way, and it's beautiful in different ways. It causes different points of connection, which I think, again, all of our required classes do that, but some of our non-required classes that we don't talk about as much do that just as well, too.
Going off of like, Blair mentioned it at first and then Justin said too, mistakes. When you guys are doing your lesson plans for your secondary ed classes, I know they're like 20 pages long and it seems ridiculous, but something that did really help me doing those lesson plans is thinking about how a student is gonna work it 3 different ways, and 2 different ways they're gonna make a mistake. So I don't know if you guys have to do that still, but when you're writing your lesson plans and you do a task, you have to write 3 different ways the student is gonna solve it and 2 different ways they're gonna make a mistake. That helped me more than anything in the classroom, because now whenever I give a task, I'm thinking, okay, well, John is gonna think about it this way, but Araceli's gonna think about it this way, but David's gonna think about it this way, and then when LaMarcus makes a mistake, this is how I'm gonna redirect him to Araceli, so that was the best practice that I could ever get, doing something that seems so tedious and crazy.
You're not gonna write lesson plans like that.
Yeah, you aren't. That's not a real thing, by the way.
One more thing about, you kind of mentioned about lesson plans, and the first thing I thought about differentiation. That's my principal's number one thing, because he observes me, and that's like the number one thing he wants to see in the classroom. So when me having co-taught classes, I have students who are way at the bottom of the barrel, and I have students who probably shouldn't be in a co-taught class. So I have 3 different levels in all 3 of my classes, and it's so hard. But those lesson plans that we had to write, when you have to think about how students are going to think, that was, I would probably say, one of the most key things I had to do here at Georgia, was thinking about how my students were going to think, because my range is so wide. And I don't know if y'all have that same feeling too, but
Yeah, that just, everything you learn about differentiation during this program, it helps you so much in class, even though you don't write it in your lesson plans. You're always thinking about it when you design your task. So, and that's one of the biggest things that principals and, administration looks for when they're interviewing you is, how are you gonna differentiate your instruction? So taking all of that into your interview process is also really good.
Man, if you guys like get the questions
Feel
in
like-
advance, this is
feel
really
like
good.
you should
Yeah, should have given you guys those minutes.
Do you want us to answer the
Jeremiah's
least
like
beneficial
segue
part
right in
as
there.
well?
I'm just worried about time.
No, go ahead.
Back to it. So Jeremiah is cheating and reading ahead.
Totally didn't.
You sent it out?
Wait,
So
least
we're gonna
beneficial.
change gears in a second.
Can we
talk
just
about the least
beneficial? Because me and Jeremiah, and I think everybody else on this panel is going to agree with this.
Let's go with this.
EdTPA is the least beneficial thing. And I think most people in this department overall are probably in the same sort of boat. But it gets better. Is that what they usually say?
Best project ever.
So
You know that I didn't sleep the night it was due? I literally worked all the way and I finished it at like,
We were actually,
what, 2 in the afternoon?
I think we were actually texting each other like 4 a.m. or something.
No, it's actually though, I would say that I benefited from EdTPA a little bit because, like
Always
seriously.
looking for the silver lining right now.
Yes, I am looking for the silver lining because there is one. Like I taught quadratics this year and I did my EdTPA on quadratics. So, you know, like when I was doing my interview, I was able to I was able to talk about the fact that I had already taught the content that they want to hire me for. And I was like, yeah, I did my whole EdTPA on it. And they were like, oh, okay, well, you did EdTPA. You know, like, so it was sort of, it
It's
was,
required of every teacher, but that's really impressive.
but you did it on the content that we want you for. So, I mean, it was stupid. Yeah, it's a stupid thing, but it's something you gotta do. Anyway, let's segue so I can
So
talk
did you
more.
find that out in the interview, that that's what they were looking for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the segue here was, and it's a little bit changing here about prepping for year one, but I think it's very relevant to a lot of you. Is, and I think this is a great question to reflect on, and I actually do it for myself, is what questions are you glad you asked, or what questions do you wish you had asked when you interviewed for your jobs?
I can start with this one because my high school doesn't usually hire first-year teachers. And I am told multiple time and over again that as soon as I walked out of the interview room, they knew they wanted me. And I asked why. And they're like, you asked such good questions to prepare you for this interview and knew what you wanted. So again, for those of you who have not gone to any of Lisa Mann's stuff, I don't know if she's doing anything for preparing you for interviews, but guys, she knows her stuff. And let me just say, I think we all can, because we were all there, when you were graduating from the College of Ed, you were in contention in different areas with different educators in different ways. However, STEM Ed is the most highly recruited right now, so if you can differentiate yourself to be that much more special and come in prepared for what they want, like my school is looking to go to one-to-one, and what can I add to that? Technology is a big thing. My school is very diverse and has an equity initiative. That is literally all that I did during undergrad and grad. Again, I targeted the schools I wanted to go to, but again, I made myself marketable. But the best question that they said that really stood out for them, that I asked, because again, I think so much of the time, we as interviewees don't think about this, but your interviewers want you there. That's why you have gotten a first interview, a second interview. They want you there. Take control and ask, why do you like teaching here? Why? Because if that does not wholly match up with what you want from an educational experience, you are not going to be happy. So much of the time, I think when we interview for a job, we go in and we think, oh, I have to impress them, I have to impress them. You've already impressed them. If you're in a face-to-face interview, they've gotten your resume, it looks good. Yes, you should impress them more, but know that you have impressed them enough to ask a simple question like that. And again, my panel gave me a great answer. The kids are amazing. They are the reason I come back every day, and again, I can attest to that. And that was what I was looking for. I'm like, do I have students and parents that are going to support me, and do I have an administration? And they said the students are the best. The administration that we have is awesome. And our parents, they support you in most ways. And again, I talk to my department head because he tells me every single time, he's like, you've impressed us more thoroughly than we thought we would get. But as soon as you walked out of that interview room and asked that question, you acted like you had the job and you asked the right questions. So that was like the biggest thing. So I'm really happy when I saw this question. I was like, ooh, I never get to tell anybody this. But I think so much of the time, especially for you first year teachers going out there, it was clear when we graduated, we had 27 people or something from the science and math ed versus our friends from English and social studies and early childhood who are like 5 times our size. That's what you're going up against. That's what you want, because you are more marketable just simply because of the degree you have from the place you have it. So act like it.
I didn't ask that question, that's a great question.
I got really excited when I
You
read
got
it.
your own?
The only one I ever remembered was what kind of technology or how do y'all common planning within the class or within the school? Because when I was doing my student teaching, they had a great co-planning group between during every planning or at the end of school, or I think it was at the end of school or during planning. But we had, all the math teachers have common planning where I am, and so we call it pods. It's like based off,
Google? Google?
no, like our group pods, like Algebra 1 has their own like little group, and the geometry teachers meet one day, and Algebra 2 teachers meet one day. But once they told me that when I'm interviewed, then I asked them about technology, because one class, I think, Jeremiah, did you take that technology class over the summer?
Dr. Smith
yeah.
usually taught it when I was.
And so we learned about all
I
these
took
different,
That was Joseph.
oh, well.
Yikes.
I thought you were. But we learned about so many different like little technology outlets that we could use in the classroom. So I just wanted to know what I would have at my disposal. So like every other classroom in my hall, we have 15 Chromebooks, and then I have a class set of iPads that I use every single day. And me and Justin have been talking about how he does his notes, and we use this little apps, and like I'll do it in PDFs and then upload them to Google Classroom. And if people come to study hall with me, I just tell them to look up the notes on the classroom if they missed the previous day. And so it's nice to have that. And we're trying to go to 1-to-1 next year. I don't know if it'll happen because we're getting a new principal, so I have no idea.
So you're saying every other classroom has a set of Chromebooks,
It has 15.
has 15,
So 1 to 4.
and you have iPads?
Well, I have the media center's iPads, but yes.
Okay, so you just kind of have some. I was gonna say, it seems like a lot of.
Still, that's what I have.
Well, it was
I
really,
agree with Blair. I think that adding the technology thing was a big aspect for me in my interview. For those that didn't know, I'm a huge tech guy. So when you see all this stuff with the iPads and all this, and hopefully you've gotten a chance to pull out the iPads out of these carts and play with the iPad Pros, especially with the math stuff. Like I saved up and bought my own iPad Pro so that I could have it with an Apple TV in my classroom. Turns out this year they bought them for all the math teachers at my high school, not at the middle school. But anyways, one of the things is I walked into the interview with my iPad and was able to show 2 different schools' work that I had done here on the iPad and show how I can project that and mirror it to the screen and allow students to write on it, to work, present on it. My county is very affluent, but not in the 1-to-1 technology department. They're working to try to get it done in the next 5 years, but luckily my school is supposed to go 1-to-1 next year. I can't wait for that because I have to sign up for a Chromebook cart that I'm lucky if I get once a week. And with all of the GeoGebra and Desmos stuff, like I have just tons of teacher.desmos.com. Go just search it. There are amazing tasks in there. And I don't get to use it enough, and I feel like my students would benefit from it more. So the more that I push that, the more my administration and the principals that I interviewed with were like, yes, we want that because that's where everyone needs to be going.
and my students love when we get to use iPads because they get to write on it, and they have their own PDF documents. They can like zoom in, write it up, and I'll just say, hey, Joey, can you project your work on the board? And then he can sit from his desk, explain how his work, and then I can mirror mine. Oh, because I have an Apple TV. I just got that like 3 weeks ago, and it's awesome. But he, like all my students, they absolutely just love it. And I mean, I don't really know if I would have known how to do it without some of the classes that we did in here, because we projected our work onto these TVs in here.
So we're kind of sparring a little bit. so let me make sure we're summarizing here correctly. One good question that was asked was, why do you like
Why do you
working
like
here?
to teach here?
And both Blair and Justin are kind of saying that asking about the technological aspects of a school can be important to make sure that the technology needs match what you want in your classroom, kind of. Are there any other questions that you guys feel?
I'll get us back on track.
In general, make sure you ask the questions that are specific to you, because if you're not a technology buff, that's fine, it's so fine. Obviously, we all like technology in our classrooms, hence why we ask questions about it. But again, make sure the school you're going to looks just as good when you're there in reality as it did on the computer screen or on the paper of what you thought it was gonna be. Because if you go in and you're like, this is what I expected it to be, and you don't ask that question of, hey, how are you really incorporating a gifted curriculum in here, and gifted education is really or important to you, or special education, and you don't ask that question and then don't see it delivered, that sort of stinks when you could have avoided that, and when you have lots of options right now, so.
I would say to ask very specific questions, and just like she said, tailored to you. And also do some research on the school that you're getting interviewed at. Like, our school is an IB school, now moving into PBIS, also getting one-to-one technology in the upcoming academic year. Like, ask questions and show that you actually did your research. That really helps out a lot. Also, if you plan on coaching, that actually makes you very marketable too. So say, hey, I plan on helping out with extracurricular activities. Do you have any, opportunities that a first-year teacher like myself could get into? Those kind of things. Where your interests are, making specific questions that will help you be the best that you can be for your first year. I believe administration likes that a lot. It's because they know they can see that you know what you're getting into and you know what you want.
Plus one.
Move it on.
Sorry. I was showing good pedagogical practice of wait time.
No,
Did
honey,
you
you
count
know
to
what?
5 or did you count to 10? So
I was
that's
I was
completely
just
different.
All day long.
We are 13 minutes behind schedule, let's move
Thank you,
it.
thank you. I should have given you all this too. Alright, so we're gonna skip a couple of the questions I'm preparing for year one, since you guys are so long-winded.
I'll give you one piece of advice. You ready? Buy a flash drive and ask everyone for anything that they have. Most of them won't take the time to give it to you, but I promise you, the ones that do, even if it's not anything that you use, it's awesome to just have their
You can start with
worksheets and resources
Yeah,
and those
no,
things.
it's so true.
It is so hard to get people to give you things sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Why are you
That's
doing
so
this?
true.
Buy a flash drive and be like, hey, is there any way I can get all of your documents from your computer for algebra?
Yeah.
Cool.
No, I would seriously piggyback off of that.
Telling
Like,
you.
my big advice to you guys would be steal everything
It's
from
not
your mentor
stealing.
teacher. No, steal it. Take everything of theirs, and I'm not kidding. Take everything of your friend's mentor teacher. Like, I have stuff of my coworker's mentor teacher when they went through math ed at UGA. And I sent an email out to all our cohort, and I was like, hey, any of the tasks that you worked on during the school year, send them my way. Like, because you guys wrote lesson plans on them. You've done multiple tasks. Take them from people. You're gonna need them. Trust me. I teach analytic geometry, which is Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And these guys all have experience with at least something of that. Can I have your stuff? Can I have your stuff? Give me, like, seriously, take everything.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you. That was just my one major thing.
I mean, speaking of that, Justin, I remember texting him one day, he has an 8th grade class that he's teaching, because basically you're teaching them Algebra 1, and we were doing quadratics with my support kids, and he said, well, at the time I was teaching exponential, and he said, well, I'm teaching quadratics, and he just sent me this. And it was like some quadratic experiment or
It was like a
project,
project to do on.
and I just read through it, and I said, well, we're not on quadratics yet, but we can always review, and I actually just used it 2 weeks ago, and my kids absolutely loved it, and
That's awesome.
it took
Stuff.
almost all 83 minutes.
Also, utilize the resources you do in the room with your professors. Y'all, I have done almost every single task in Dr. Moore's book. It is amazing to see it happen before your eyes, like as a teacher from the flip side, asking the same questions, and it's even more amazing when you do like Fly on the Fan, right? Everybody remember Fly on the Fan and how we talked about if you separate this into equal sections, it's increasing at a decreasing rate, all of that, right? Y'all, we got into derivatives, and we got into derivative of trig functions. I split the derivative, or I split the sine and cosine function into equal sections, and I asked, what's happening here? It's decreasing at an increasing rate. Oh my gosh, it's the cosine function! Like, getting that aha moment and seeing it, utilize these tasks. They're proven to work because you did them. And your students have the capability to do them too, even though they might seem far out of reach. So, use each other, but also use what you've used.
I know we're talking about resources, but definitely reach out to your department head and reach out to your fellow coworkers like beforehand. That really helped me out. Once I got my job, that was like a month in advance of pre-planning. I just went ahead, reached out, and asked a bunch of questions. Can you help me out with this, that, and this? Don't be afraid to ask questions to the people around you. I ask questions all the time. I take stuff all the time, and make it your own. It's not technically copying, but don't there's no need to reinvent the wheel either, right?
Exactly.
So I would feel ethically wrong if I didn't at least put in that if you do take things from other people and they give it to you, you should always ask if it's okay if you give that to someone else before you actually give it to anyone else. It's one thing to use it yourself, it's another thing to give away their stuff.
Right.
But with that said, if you want all my crap, I want to give it to everyone, I don't care. Can I move on yet or not?
Yeah, I think you're good.
That was my thing, man.
Justin, that was great, thank you. I'm glad you did
That
that.
was my thing.
Alright, so we're gonna have to, cut and chop, that's fine. So I know that from talking to a lot of you, and something that they didn't really bring up, which was interesting, is that you all talk about how we don't do a lot at the UGA Math Ed program about classroom management, and that, I think we all give you the kind of vague answer of it's a kind of something you gotta feel out for yourself as you get in the classroom, and you have different students that are gonna react differently, you can't beat them, so don't do that kind of stuff. So we're gonna spend a couple minutes, because you guys have had that experience now, and just talk about classroom management. So you guys take a quick second and read the questions and pick which one you think would be the most fun to answer, because I don't think we have time for all three.
Take their cell phones.
Thank God.
Take them. I'm not kidding. Day one, you walk in the room, you trade your cell phone for a calculator. If you don't get a calculator for the day, you're absent. And before you leave your student teaching experience, do a classroom behavior management plan. Write this down. Thank you. Write this down. Do a classroom behavior management plan. Go into your interview with your classroom behavior management plan. Show them that you have a plan for any sort of situation that's going to come up in your classroom.
Can you elaborate on what you have?
Yes, so you can Google this, and I'm going to try to send Dean this PDF, and so he can send it out to all of you guys. There's like a PDF of this woman who set a binder of like what you should do in this scenario and this scenario, and she separates it like a project. So she teaches future teachers, and she gave this assignment to her future teachers to just come up with a portfolio of what you would do in this scenario and what your consequences would be and da 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 da. And so she has a plan for if my kid talks out of turn, this is what I do. If my kid has their cell phone when I've told them not to, this is what I do. Blah, blah, blah. So if you go into an interview with that, then you've shown that you have a plan for behavior, because that's half of what hirers care about, honestly, is that you have a plan. And then it shows that you have researched, and it's actually really good to research consequence-based discipline. So research discipline, that's another piece of information, of advice that I would give to you, is research what discipline does to a kid, what consequences do to students, because you guys know, I've had students where if I call them out in class, they'll shut down. But I have other students where if I call them out in class, they'll act right. So have a plan and do that before you leave student teaching. Go into your first day taking cell phones and then telling your students what you're going to do if they do X, Y, and Z.
I will second that notion about cell phones.
Take them.
But kind of like what you said in your interview, the number one question I got in every single one of my interviews was, how are you going to manage your classroom? granted, in your student experience, or your student teaching experience, you won't know, because when you're walking in somebody else's classroom, they've already established a norm, so you gotta have in your head, how are you gonna wanna do your classroom? And I was sitting in that same seat last year, along with all of us, and the number one thing they said was to take their cell phones, and every now and then, we'll have a day where they can use their cell phones for like a span of like 10, 15 minutes, because I have the kids, they're used to it, and they wanna break some every now and then, so I reward them. But have that plan, have like a cell phone plan, or have a discipline plan, because I have some students who, they just wanna have a stern person in the classroom who will discipline them, because they don't have that at home. But since day one, and then I mean, I would say, I don't really know if this is classroom management, but build a relationship with the students. Make them trust you. If they're gonna do something wrong, follow through with what you said day one. Don't, because if you don't do it one time, they will keep going on and on and on, and they try to push your limits. So be stern with what you said on day one on the syllabus, or the whole week one. I mean, I spent like probably a week or two just trying to establish what we were really gonna do in the classroom.
Going off of what Blair said, so I taught with the cohort that came here last year. So I've actually taught with one of those people, and we were yin and yang in a lot of ways, and it worked. And one thing that I've noticed this year that I do for classroom management that I consistently do is accountability of your students and putting it a lot on them, especially when I think about my juniors and my accelerated juniors who are about to go to great four-year institutions. Like, I've already had like 5 ask me to write a recommendation letter for UGA. But when I think about education and what I feel towards education is, it's your own, and you have to take hold of it. And when I think about, especially depending on where you go and what you teach, you cannot baby these children forever. You can't. And that's the biggest thing that I notice, again, that transitions a little bit about realizations of teaching, is how much we handhold students until they get to a certain point, and you have a teacher who's like, no, I'm not gonna do this anymore. If they choose not to do the work, that's not on me, because I am here and I am ready to teach them. But if they choose not to do the work, who is that on? And when I tell their parents, I'm gonna rat them out, because I've said, this is the contract we're making. Here, you can do, and again, to each their own, and I respect everything they've said, but how I work, do what you feel. But if you distract somebody else and you are a distraction in this classroom, you're out, and we're done. But if you don't do the work and you're not being a distraction, I'm not gonna sit you out in the hallway. Again, to each their own. However, my students trust me that when I say this, I'm like, I'm gonna call you out at the end of this when your test scores don't reflect what you want them to. And when you don't feel that was your best effort. Because again, putting forth for you, that was on you. You chose to make this decision, not me. And all of my juniors and my freshmen who are growing up into this high school curriculum, all of my juniors are appreciative that they feel as though they're adults, and they feel as though they were respected, and that they can be valued in a classroom and not have to be sat over to tell, here, this is what you need to do. This is what I asked you to do. But again, to each their own. But making sure that you say, here, I'm gonna keep you accountable, but you actually keep them accountable. You can't just be like, here, hands off, laissez-faire, but then 10 weeks down the road, when it's test time and they don't act up, you put it on yourself, or you allow them to walk all over you. You can't do that. So again, flip side of that coin, and I completely respect the other one. Trust me, there are certain things that I wish I would have done much more, as Jadzia and Blair have said. But again, you have to stay firm in what you're choosing to do.
I'd say you also have to be structured. Coming from a middle school perspective, I have to do a lot of handling. There's sixth graders moving up. So, I feel like it moves on even forward, but one big thing, seating charts. Seating charts, real big. I feel like setting up that norm in the beginning, having kids know what they're expected to do when they come in. And one big thing that a lot of us actually misconceive is there's a difference between rules and expectations. Rules you have to make very clear-cut, very simple, definite consequences. Expectations are something that you expect them to do every single day, and something that they can work on throughout the year, and something that they build upon, for the rest of their school careers. So I just feel like classroom management, just make that very clear. For my school, we actually have that first whole week just to set up those norms. Like our principal actually gives every single teacher the whole first week to do that. So, for us, that's pretty nice. Like she understands that teachers have to get that set up straight and that all teachers are different. So when I send my 6th graders to 7th grade, it's gonna be a different dynamic. So, when my kids come from 5th grade, it's completely different. They're fresh off the boat, right into middle school, and it's just a whole different world for them. So just having that very clear cut and spending at least that first month, just every single day, reminding the kids of what's expected of them, giving consequences and actually following through with what you said you're going to do to them, just consistently, I feel like that's real key.
My advice is the first day that you get your roster, go ahead and make a seating chart of alphabetical order, reverse alphabetical order. Go number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 if you're gonna sit them in 4s, 1, 2 if you're gonna sit them in groups. Go ahead and have like 10 different variations of a seating chart. And I have 10th graders who are like 16 years old who ask me when they come into the room, where do I sit? And like you wouldn't expect that of adults, but they know that I don't play about if you're sitting right here and I don't want you to sit there, go move. And I have like a bunch of different seating charts. If they want to act up, here's alphabetical reverse. If you want to act out, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, go ahead and be prepared because you don't want to be in February without a seating chart or a behavior plan, and it's 11:30 at night, and you're gonna stay up multiple nights worrying about your kids. Multiple nights you're gonna go to bed being like, I really just don't really want to see Marcus tomorrow because I know that they're gonna freak out. But if you have a plan, then you'll be fine.
Definitely have a plan.
So many nights.
Also, they're not gonna tell you this either, but it's those kids that you never want to see that never miss a day of school.
Bingo.
We're gonna move on.
I'm wrong.
I'm gonna, can I ask what she?
I don't know, Blair, can you?
It's great, yes, I can.
Go ahead.
So, she mentioned seating chart day one. I did a thing, somebody told me about it, and I thought it was a great idea, and I didn't think it actually worked, but day one, they walked in, and I had something written on the board, and I said, sit yourself in alphabetical order. It took them about 40 minutes, but they finally did it. But they got them talking, they got them just relaxed, because I didn't do anything for first day, because we had an 83-minute class, so first period definitely took them about 45 minutes, because they just didn't want to talk, and I just sat at my desk, wait for them, they were just like little ants walking around the classroom. But they finally did it, and so they were talking, and this kind of started off the year, I guess, more relaxed than I guess they had been used to, I guess. So it kind of got them just chitter chatter right up at the beginning. And maybe think about that because you said you had a kid that didn't know his ABCs.
Oh yeah, I'd sometimes get kids straight from the international school, doesn't even know numbers 1 through 30, and I'm expected to teach content to them. It's really rough.
All right, segue, keep it rolling.
What was that a segue to?
You choose. How do you choose names?
You're the Segway master.
Yeah, I don't have a good segue with that one.
Realization.
So, actually, I'm intrigued to see if you guys have any answers to the question that's the last one, then we'll move on to realization, which is, do you have anything that you tried in your classroom that you've already abandoned because you just didn't think was effective?
Don't do that. Try something for 21 days and only quit if it doesn't work after that. Like
Keep trying.
yes, seriously, because your kids are gonna resist every single thing you do the first time that you do it. And your student teaching, because it's so short, will teach you that, oh, you try something and it doesn't work, move on. Try something else, because you only have like a semester to do all this, blah, blah, blah. In your classroom, if something doesn't work the first time, just keep doing it. And it will work eventually. Like my seating charts, I gave up on them after the first semester. But it's March and I still have kids asking me, where do I sit? I didn't think that they worked, but they work. The kids will just never let you know what they like and don't like, because they don't like everything. So seating charts. I abandoned it, don't abandon it. Like, do it.
No, it's like doing abstract algebra, creating seating charts.
Yes.
You're just sitting there like, no, that's not gonna work. Nope, that's, no.
So I love your answer to that too, but I mean, do any of you all have anything that was
Yeah.
like, you thought this might be a good idea, and then after you did try it for 21 days, that you were like, maybe
I
that
had
wasn't such a
another
good idea.
thing, I don't, because we have Mondays and Fridays are 45 minutes and Tuesday through Thursday is 70 minutes. I don't want my kids to go to the bathroom during a 45-minute day. Like, I know that sounds really mean, but it's like either go between a class change, be like 2 minutes late, but don't miss my class because you have to go to the bathroom. So I tried no bathroom on a short day, and it really didn't work because I just have kids that lie and they're like, it's an emergency, when they really just want to leave, and I can't really fight that battle, and I don't want parents, because I've had parents call me like, you're not letting my kid go to the bathroom, and I'm like, they're lying though. But that I tried, don't let them go to the bathroom on a 45-minute day. That was kind of a stupid rule anyway. I also tried bathroom breaks, even though we're in 10th grade. Like, since I have a collaborative teacher, I would, 40 minutes into class, when I noticed 2 or 3 hands start going up asking to go to the bathroom, I'd be like, so who else wants to go to the bathroom? And it would be like 10 people. So I said, okay, well, let's take 5 minutes, put it on the timer, go to the bathroom. The others would just get like a little mental break. And then they would come back and it would be fine. That actually worked for a long time. I abandoned it just because I didn't feel like doing it anymore.
Okay, so here's what I'm doing right now
Yeah.
with my 8th graders, and I've been doing for 3 weeks, and so far so good. We have a bathroom break, but we stand in a straight line and walk them to the bathroom. And just, they walk right down the entire 8th grade hall, and everyone sees them walking to the bathroom like 2nd graders.
You should make them put their hands
So
on
I'm
the
only,
side.
I'm only, you know, a week and a half into it, 2 weeks in. So I haven't got my 21 days in, but so far
Don't quit it.
they don't raise their hand and ask to go to the bathroom the rest of the class, so we take 4 minutes.
My class has had that since day
I'm
one.
tired of it leaving.
Good.
Well, I did a thing.
But that's 6th grade, I mean, not 8th
Sixth grade's
grade,
completely
10th
different.
grade would be a little bit
Yeah.
worse, but
It'd
maybe
be
you
fun.
walk them in a straight line, and they walk by a bunch of other classes, and all of a sudden they're like, this isn't cool.
Right.
Maybe I just need to stay in class on the short days.
Well, we had a rule like no 10-minute, like the first 10 minutes, last 10 minutes. I kind of gave that up because our campus is so huge. We have 15 buildings, and a lot of my kids are coming from the Ninth Grade Center, which is the farthest away from my classroom as possible. And we had to walk up there for professional learning every Thursday, and I mean it's a good 6-minute walk, and we have 7 minutes between periods. So I have a couple students I know for a fact they're coming from that building. They get in my room, they say, can I go to the bathroom? And I'm like, I mean, I know how it is. I mean, if you're walking 6 straight minutes and you can't go to the bathroom in that amount of time, so I let them go. And next thing you know, all these kids are realizing that I'm letting them go at the beginning of class, and it kind of spiraled out. But I mean, most kids are good with it, and then I'll tell them if they get there and they're coming from the Ninth Grade Center, it's okay. But maybe 3 minutes was a long period. And
So to summarize, go to your interviews with a bathroom plan.
No joke. This is not a game, people. Go with the plan.
We're gonna move forward.
Please.
So, I think we're gonna probably only get to ask one of these questions before we go to open forum. I think maybe 2. So let's go to number 2 here. So what is something you did not expect about teaching that has made you happy? And on the flip side of that, is there anything that you didn't expect about teaching that you have found to be difficult?
I think for me, the thing that I didn't expect was, even though I said this in my interview, because again, it was in my interview and my administrator was in there, was the administrator support. So like if you're in an interview and you work for the school, which again, all the people hiring me work for the school, and you're like, yeah, the administration's great, you can't tell if they're lying or not, right? Because like your boss is in the room, the person who evaluates you. But I've been very surprised by the support I've had from my colleagues as well as from my administration. I think when I came up and why I wanted to become a teacher, I saw administration really focused on testing and really focused on we have to make sure our students do the best possible in AP tests and IB tests and standardized tests, that I was like scared to an extent that I'm like, if I give a disastrous lesson ever, I am going to get straight 2s and then I'm going to lose my job. Like that's exactly what I thought. But my administrator has literally, no joke, including student teaching, he has walked in every single time on my 3 worst lessons I've ever given. ever. I've passed all of them. I've never failed because he asked me, okay, what did you do to improve it? What did you talk about with Mac, who's my co-teacher, to improve it in between? What did you do to change it up? Because he, again, was a teacher as well. And again, talking to my colleagues and being able to feel supported as the youngest person and respected. Because I think so much of the time I hear from a lot of other, not necessarily math ed professionals, but a lot of other professionals in our, in education, they feel as though it's like, okay, I'm new at this, so my ideas don't matter. I'm new at this, so this isn't how we've done things. Whereas that's not been the case for me. So that's like something that I expected to be good or was hopeful was gonna be good, but it's been much better than I even expected.
I felt like my first couple months was like student teaching all over again. And I was just waiting for my mentor teacher to come back into the room. Like, one day I was going to the bathroom after school and I was just thinking like, I feel like I use the student's restroom just because it's closer and why not, it's the same. And I was just like walking in there like a student and then like wondering when my mentor teacher was gonna come back, and I was like, wait. There is no mentor teacher anymore. And then like realizing that it's all on me, that took until like February to realize, which was really weird. And I also feel like a student at school, but not in the sense of like I'm so young. I feel like I'm a student of my students, so I'm always walking around like observing them and wondering like what they're thinking about and how they're gonna connect with my class today. Like, I feel just as much of a student as they should.
So do you find that it's something you didn't expect that you find good? Bad?
Right, I didn't expect that. I thought that I would come in there like, this is my job, I'm some authority figure, whatever, put me in a suit, like I'm different than them, but I'm no different than my students. I just know a lot more.
You still wear a suit?
I do not wear a suit. I've yet to buy a full suit, but I will. Got a blazer last month.
Halfway
Yes.
professional, getting there.
Yes. All right, Justin, I haven't heard from you in so long.
One of the things that I think that is the most important that I learned when I was student teaching and talked to a bunch of people was developing relationships with the kids. So one of the things that I think that you kind of expect is that to be easy and how much of, I didn't expect how much, I guess I didn't realize how much of myself I was gonna have to give up in order to create that relationship, like how much of my personal life I was gonna have to give to them, like I tried to keep it, you know, a little bit separate, and they just, I mean, my kids are 8th graders, so they're a little bit younger, but they just dig and dig and dig, and one of our other cohort members is at the high school above me, and they're digging and digging and digging with her, and I talk to her often, but I think I didn't expect the more difficult students that give you the hardest time, or maybe the wrong kind of students, to be the ones that you develop the relationship with, that you maybe don't even realize it. It's weird when you have a student get expelled from school for something that didn't happen in your class, and you've never really had an issue with the student, and you know that she's, like this particular student was a problem in school to other teachers and to other kids, but in my class it was fine, and then I get an email from her, and I get the email from her telling me that she's expelled and thanking me for math, and it was kind of just like, I think that was one of those things you don't expect, that the students that are the most difficult are the ones that you might build that bond with without realizing it. So I guess maybe don't take any of those little small arguments or the disrespect or the not caring what you say or feeling like they don't respond to you at all as being, that kid just doesn't like me, because sadly it's weird, but that kid's probably the one that likes you the most, which is totally backwards of what you expect.
It's like you're on the
But
playground.
I've seen that a bunch of different times this year.
Do you guys mind on this? I just really like what Justin said there, so I want to build something off that is, don't listen to your other teachers. Like, they're gonna come to you and they're so ready to talk crap about students sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's toxic, and like Justin said, like some of the worst students is because no teacher's ever taken time to build a relationship with them. So, you know, go go in with an open mind. Like, I wish my older brother, like, really set the bar low for me, so it was nice. No, I'm just kidding. My brother was a stud, so it was hard to fill his shoes.
Dean, stop.
No,
That
that's,
was on,
and then testing, obviously, you have to do everything you can, and I mean, I'm sure y'all have a ton of students, I have like 128 now total, and it's like, it's hard to get every one of them, and I don't think I've gotten every single one of them, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
And I worry that maybe I don't say hello to that kid enough, and then I try it, and they kind of like, and that one girl who got expelled reached out to me in the email the day it happened. I found out from her, and it was just like, it sucked because at the same time I was expecting her, and she was just starting to like really show that she had some mathematical ability and was really going to focus and do well, and I was super excited about how she was going to do on the next test. And then something happened outside of my classroom somewhere else, and you're like, dang, man, I just got to her.
I have kind of like a similar thing with a couple of my students, especially one in particular. I heard basically like what Dean said, like teachers are toxic. Even my assistant principal said it. This kid's a troublemaker. He's been in trouble over and over and over, and I was like, oh great, what am I getting myself into? And now this kid, I mean, I've had him since August. He is in we have like a 30-minute study hall every single day, and he is in my room every single day. It might not even be talking about math. It might be talking about the basketball tournament. In football season, we talk about football. I mean, he's not the smartest, but he's the hardest working, and he's just, I mean, ever since day one, I don't know why, he just has talked to me, and I mean, every day I see him twice a day. You know, I see him in second period, and then I see him during lunch. Sometimes I eat lunch with him, and then he'll come to my study hall and just sit there and just chatter. And even my assistant principal says that he's, in some of my other classes, that he's just like the biggest troublemaker, but in my class, there's never been a single issue. So, like what Dean said, don't listen. I mean, some students, it'll be the same, but if they tell you this kid's a troublemaker, just ignore it and try to build that relationship. Try harder with that student.
Give every kid a chance.
Yes.
Is what you want to do. That's what I did. I'll have a lot of coworkers just tell me, this kid sucks, I hate him, blah, 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 worst of my class. But then I realized those teachers are dictators in their class. So, you know, like Dean said, don't listen to everybody. It's those kids that come to me crying and, you know, asking for advice and stuff. And then, you know, answering this question, I never expected to be a father figure at 23. You know, you're gonna run into sorry. You're gonna run into some situations where you're gonna meet students in a lot of rough, you know, situations at home, and that's why they're acting out at school. But like we said, give them a chance, you know, get to know them, build a relationship with them, and then in the end, they're going to, you know, I got a bunch of letters from a couple kids saying, "You're the reason I come to school every day." You know, that's, you know, for us, that's very fulfilling.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and for us, that's also the reason why we go to school. So, that's something that I didn't really expect too much of, but definitely it's made me happy and fulfilling.
There have been so many days when I want to quit.
you don't get to just pick what questions you want to answer.
Yes, I do. Yes,
You
you
said
didn't
pick two.
delegate time well. There have been so many days.
This is
So
like
many
dictatorship.
days.
Uprising.
That's a good question. That's such a, whoever asked
I thought it was
that,
coming from a mouth.
kudos to you. There have been so many days where I've just wanted to be like, I'm too good for this. I'm so serious. And you all have probably had those moments, but every one of us will have one of those days. Dean, you probably had a moment where you're like, I'm too good for
I had to
this.
be your supervisor.
Right? No, Dean was my supervisor when I was student teaching. He had to deal a lot. But
Sorry, Dean.
and you guys will have it. There will be a lot of days during student teaching where you'll just want to be like, I don't want to be here. Like the last couple days of school. I don't know. But you have to remember your purpose. Remember why you're there. And every single day go back to your purpose. I want to go back because of the UGA mentality. Like we were talking earlier about what UGA has done for us. Well, UGA has like taught me to never quit, and that when I come back, I can do better. Growth mindset. Like, if you teach yourself and your kids growth mindset, they'll want to come back to your class every day. And that's why I want to go back to teaching. Like, I could have not signed my contract. I could have just quit because it's not easy to teach. But I want to go back because I can do better and I can live out the UGA legacy in my classroom.
Hopefully you got that on film, 'cause
Yeah.
she'll be selling that.
Yeah.
Upload that
I
to
think we
our-
have halftime commercial.
Admissions department.
Alright, guys, since I don't do a good job of time, can I do something?
What?
Alright, do you guys have like 9 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's open it up. If, you know, you guys have all sat here silently and giggled at their corny jokes, thank you for that. We've got 9 minutes. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask anyone on the panel that you've been thinking about?
Oh.
And I don't really go,
Mr. Cook!
Okay, so building off of like, with, each of you had the different, you did come and see me today. Each of you had a different sort of bathroom plan. Like, what was something that y'all, yeah, it's gonna be but, so, what is something that y'all, like, in no way sort of planned for or expected to become an issue that you at some point were just like, I mean, other than the bathroom, but what's something else that you were just like, okay, this is something I did not realize would be an issue or something that I have to tackle. What is it that you've had to tackle and how have you sort of addressed it?
what's some of our responses, like 30 seconds?
My kids lie about having to go to the nurse all the time. If they need to go to the nurse, have the nurse email you that they're actually there. I've had so many kids skip my class because it's the same bathroom thing. If they realize that I don't let them go to the bathroom, oh, well, can I go to the nurse?
We had nurse passes, and the nurse has to sign and get back in our room.
That's a good idea.
We have hallway.
Well, our bathroom, we had, I don't know if this is really safe to say, but a lot of our students want to go to the bathroom, do things they shouldn't be doing, and then come back smelling like they shouldn't be smelling.
Putting on perfume?
Yeah,
Yeah. Allergies.
a great perfume.
Right. Okay, keep going, 30 seconds.
But yeah, so you gotta kind of cut down on which students are those students, and that was
I'll
quite
tell you
interesting.
one thing that you don't realize is gonna happen is the amount of meetings that you are gonna have during your planning. You are gonna
Oh,
have IEP meetings, you're gonna have 504 meetings, you're gonna have
Wait, you have
grade level meetings, you're gonna have
God.
vertical meetings,
Please, it's on tape.
you're gonna have, so like,
They're good.
these things are gonna happen often, all the time, take up your whole planning period. If it says 8:15 to 8:45, expect it to go to 9:30.
Just don't expect to have planning periods during the daytime. Like, this is an actual teaching tip. Do everything the night before, the week before, whatever, so that if you don't get a planning period, because there are days where we have substitutes that don't come, so I have to go cover a class. It happened in Mr. Cook's class today. I didn't get my planning period because I have to go sub. Just don't even expect to have a planning.
Does anyone have common planning and assessment at their schools?
Yep.
Okay, so my question is, you know, we've talked a lot about kind of like the UGA style of learning and teaching, where it's like project-based and task-based, and something that I've experienced in my student teaching this semester is that I am the one person in our math department of 23 that likes to teach like that, and it's kind of difficult whenever I want to teach something a certain way, but that's not how they're assessed on it. Because I've learned that the kids need a lot of time and practice to develop that style of learning. And so if I give them a task, but then they're asked a multiple choice question, they don't have that, they haven't built that bridge yet between the two. So how have you adjusted to that, to where you can still really give them some meaningful and deep learning experiences to where they are really working and you're challenging them, but they're still prepared for these common assessments that everyone else is giving?
So, I feel like Rachel can probably speak on that
Yeah.
really well, but since we have common formatives, we've changed the formatives to all multiple choice to being multiple choice, short answer, free response. And so when my kids are doing task-based learning in my class, and the challenge is you have to come up with a multiple choice test based on the knowledge that you have. So like my kids are doing tasks all day long. They don't, like, I don't do lessons and stuff. And when it's time to do test review, because they're gonna take the EOC, which is all multiple choice, my challenge to them, they literally get credit for coming up with a multiple choice
So they
version.
make it.
They need to make their own tests.
Okay.
Mhm.
For me, I do a lot of project-based and task-based learning in my pre-calculus class. In my Algebra 1, it happens too, but again, I feel because it's on level, it takes a lot of practice to get a lot of stuff through, that it's a lot harder, but I think a couple things to look for in a school in general before like overarching, like once I'm in my classroom is look for a school where that is at the heart of it. So IB schools, schools where AP testing, I think IB is a very different animal, which I don't think gets talked about enough, where it's holistic grading. So I don't give a score on any assessment out of a percentage. It's on a 1 to 8 scale. So it's holistic. But again, it's assessing them in the same way. And my kids still have to take the EOC in the second week of May, just like Judsey's kids. So that's like one way to first attack it at the very base level of, hey, I want to do this. Then I would say make sure you try and find people who support you and support that great idea that you have. Like my opposite planner for pre-calculus, he's my department head. He has said this year that it's been so fun because he hasn't had somebody who's like completely embraced, like, let's do a project to learn how to do this. And I'm like, yes, let's do this. And I think even if it's not somebody who's on your collaborative planning team, talking to someone who is perhaps in your vertical planning team can be really helpful, because I think so much of the time, like I talk to my best friend at my school, she teaches AP Calculus. I talk to her and I'm like, how is this going to be beneficial for you, and what do you need me to hit on in this task so it's beneficial for them next year when they're taking BC, and they have half a day to get one topic done. How am I going to do that? I also think that when you focus on projects, make sure that you do have different levels within those projects, so procedures with connections, procedures without connections, doing math embedded in those projects to where you can see the different levels and the differentiation built within the task. So again, differentiating your product here rather than here, or the process if you're thinking of it as a task. Because then you can be able to see more clearly here, this is where they met this level conceptually, where did they go from there? And I think coming to that and knowing, okay, conceptually they understand this, but the procedure they're sort of lacking, that's where I need to come in and intervene. And that's where I think I've had the best experiences, is by putting that differentiation within those projects to where I know how are they going to perform eventually on these multiple choice tasks, or multiple choice summatives and formatives that they're gonna have. That is what typically is expected, and making sure you do that.
Next question.
Lindsay, I saw your hand a while ago.
First of all, is Malcolm Bridge really going 1-to-1 next year?
Yes.
Okay, my second
Chromebooks,
question.
they're gonna be, each student will have a Chromebook that they'll keep on their own.
Okay, great. My
Yeah,
second
me too.
question.
That's replacement.
Yes, that's where I'm at 7th grade. My other question is, y'all have talked a lot about how you have all these different students, and most of y'all are like teaching 2 or more different classes, and you're coaching, and you don't have a planning period, so you're doing all your planning and grading outside of school. And on top of all that, schools aren't really teaming with like 20-somethings. So how do you balance like being a teacher and all of that comes with it, but also like living life?
Existing.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Tough.
Go Jeremiah, come on now, because this is all him. He's trying to get his gifted certification, his ESOL certification, he coaches, he teaches, da-da-da, go,
Jeremiah, let's hear it.
go.
You have
Your
a life
question.
outside of
Does
that?
he have a life?
Well, okay, here's the thing, take care
It
of
just
your
made me
mental
really
health.
depressed.
If we're gonna be
Take care of
perfectly,
yourself.
like, you wanna hear my
Out of
side
all
of it
the
real
days,
quick before
all
he
the-
starts? Make sure that you just stop and do something else.
Play
I mean,
ball.
there's, like, I've heard it from other teachers, like, I'm still sitting there working at 5:30, and they're like, what are you still doing here? And I'm like, well, I don't have this stuff planned out yet, I'm way behind, I'm like a duck on water, my feet are kicking, and I look really calm on the top. Like, if you walked in my classroom, you'd think I had everything ready to roll, but I'm fixing things in between classes. You gotta just say, you know what, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna eat dinner with my wife, or I'm gonna go watch a movie, or I'm gonna go to Grindhouse after this with Blair. What's gonna happen?
My biggest advice is, we have third period planning, so I always get to school maybe an hour and 20 minutes before. Because at the end of the day, now I have to go straight to golf practice. But in the fall, once that 3:25 bell ring, how many of y'all want to do work after school? I mean, I know we have to, but how many do you want to?
I like going to football practice and
I
basketball
love getting my work done
She's one of
before.
5.
I like soccer practice.
Okay, but like me, I was the complete opposite. I'd rather do it first thing in the morning instead of doing it after school. I mean, it depending on how you are. I just got to school so much earlier than I could because of the IEP meetings. Because I have one probably twice a week. It's kind of ridiculous, but. And then every Thursday we have a PL or professional learning meeting. It's supposed to last 30 minutes. It lasts probably 70. And then all these other,
So Blair, you're saying you show up at school super early, that's like your way of kind of getting things knocked
I
out?
show up and there's 2 cars in the parking lot, the principal and assistant principal.
So that's how you kind of make some time for yourself, is so you can go home in the evenings a little bit?
Yeah.
But then I'm the complete opposite. Like, I'd rather stay until 7, get my stuff done, and then not have to wake up until the last minute, you know? Like, I'm for real rolling out of bed, like, going into school.
suited up.
True, but coffee is worn off. No, I read an article this weekend. My mentor teacher slash sister slash co-teacher, like my everything, sent me an article this weekend and was like, I'm a first year teacher and I'm burnt out. And it happens to a lot of people. Like over 70% of teachers leave within their first 5 years. Don't let that be you because it has to be. So take care of yourself. Take an hour every single day and do something for yourself all of the time. Even in your student teaching. I'm telling you that as a student teacher, live your life. And if your kids are going to go on to the next grade, like you don't have to have A1 perfection every single day because your kids are going to grow up. Because you don't have a good lesson 100% because you spent 30 hours on it in one day lesson, doesn't mean that they're not going to grow one more day older. So take care of yourself. Hey, look, there are nights where you need to stay up until 2 a.m. and then wake up at 4 a.m. That is true. There are many nights where you need to do your work, but also take care of yourself because if you don't, then you're not going to be there to take care of your kids.
I also would say planning your life as well as planning your professional career. Like, every single Sunday, literally, I'm texting my best friend earlier this week, and they asked on Sunday nights, what are you doing? And he's like, no, wait, you're meal prepping right now, you went to the gym, you've already planned your lessons, you did your gifted certification stuff, so what have you done? And so what have you done fun today? And I was like, well, I did this. Make sure you plan out your life because I know personally, like whatever gives you relief somewhere, whether it's I like to go home and work out or watch Netflix after I get home, or say you're a person who likes to cook. Cooking is not my thing, so I get that done early. And I think planning your life as well is important too, and also taking the time to be like, I'm gonna say this weekend is reserved for fun time. I'm not going to let this thing I have to get done not get in the way, but make sure you get the stuff you need to get done before you go into those days you set aside. So.
Taking care of yourself is taking care of your kids.
Yup.
So you guys talk a lot about like connecting with your students, but you also talk about having like be a dad figure. How do you like make that disconnect so that it doesn't like get so far into your personal life?
Don't be a dad.
Well,
They might
obviously.
treat you like one, but.
Oh my God,
don't be.
Yeah.
Well, the way that you love your students is by preparing them for reality and giving. So give your students consequences, not discipline. And you don't have to reprimand your students for whatever, but you do have to give them consequences and you have to be fair.
Mhm.
So sometimes when I tell my kids like yes or no, it's fair. If I told him no, I have to tell him no.
Yeah.
Hands off. And you also just realize how much of an impact your teachers had on you when you were going through school. Like, I didn't know every single thing about my teacher's life, but we feel like we have to tell all our students everything. I feel like I have to tell my students what I do when I go home. I don't. They don't need to know that about, they don't need to know my middle name.
They
Like,
will ask though.
They will ask, but they don't,
Yeah.
none of my students know my first name.
Are you
Oh,
kidding?
wow.
I'm
There's
not
no-
kidding you.
They will
I'm
find
not
out.
kidding you.
We've already found them.
They can look at it.
I was like,
Sure.
deny.
Like my name is posted on
It's
my
not
door.
the
They can see my name, but none of them know how to pronounce it because that is a boundary that I refuse to let them cross.
The storm got me.
Like Justin said, before this thing even started, he was like, there are certain things that I just don't tell my kids. And there have to be, just set boundaries and then laugh when they try to push them. I laugh at my kids all the time.
I wanted to go off what Jadzia said because I think this comes back around to especially how you handle your classroom and how you're gonna experience different teachers who do different things as we discussed earlier. You have to ensure that disciplinary is not necessarily your goal, but you do have to give them consequences and give them a realistic view of the world. I am much more laissez-faire than probably most of these people, but that does not mean that my students walk over me. Again, when they do something wrong, or they do not perform and they start getting on their pulpit of, well, why did this not go that way? We're about to have a sermon and you're gonna be mad because you are questioning your actions for what you did. Again, delivering consequences, and I think that's so very important. If nothing else, when you come away from this with what you need to do in your classroom, please make sure that you give your students a realistic view of the world and don't let them walk all over you. Because so many teachers in their first year let that happen. And consequences and how you handle your classroom might be different, but you need to have them. So that was that big thing, and making sure, again, with your boundaries question,
It's okay.
like, call them out. If it's like, no, I do that all the time. I was like, we don't need to be talking about this. We're done with this conversation. And then I divert. I was like, math, that thing on the board, that one, yeah, that's what you should be doing. That's what I do.
Nip things in the bud. That's what you want to do. Another thing you guys might not know, I have a coworker that's the same age as me. He went ahead and told them his age. Don't do that.
No.
Lied
Don't do that.
through your
Lied-
teeth.
I
lied
told them my age.
Well, he's a.
My students think I'm 35.
I take Jonathan's advice and always just say I'm old enough, or that's what I tell kids if they think I'm 35. So, and sixth graders, they have no concept of age. They think
They'll figure it out, they have Google.
If your students
They
are
will
close to
Google
your
it.
age, you seriously do not tell them. Literally do not tell them. And especially if you have students who like to push limits, given I have not had any students like that as a female who like to push limits, don't tell them your age.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. They are going to push you and it is not gonna be fun.
Make your student teaching experience feel like a year of teaching in your students' minds. Like I told my kids,
Oh
Well,
yeah.
I worked at the high school
last
last year.
year,
Talk to Claire Trentro.
Where'd you come from? I worked at
I
the high
tried
school
at
last year.
last year, guys.
Well, I did.
and then they're like, hey, are you turning like 24? Go higher. Move those numbers around. I'm going 50 next year. My kids do literally, I give them a different answer every single time. They don't need to know.
They choose low, like, how old are you, 24? Yes.
I was just an undergrad last year, what do you think I am?
I don't know that either.
Yeah, don't tell them you just graduated.
Some of my old classmates.
So I'm gonna take this as the moment to cut this off. I think an hour and a half of your time has been plenty, and I really appreciate it. So if you guys don't mind giving our panelists thank you guys very much for your time, and thank you all very much for your time. And if you have any other questions, or if you want any resources, feel free to reach out, or contact information for them, or if you need.
If you guys want, if you guys ever want to observe us,
We
I
can
feel like we would.
To our
we would-
house.
We're gonna have to work on your technology.
So,
Does
May,
anyone
this is
teach
May.